All right, guys. I have been wrestling with this for days, for a couple of weeks. And I don't know where I've come to with it. And I've written it down and I've spoken with my people about it. And I'm just going to share it with y'all because there's something in it that's really important and I can't quite put my finger on it. So sometimes talking about it helps with that. And maybe y'all have some feedback for me that will help me. And so what it is that when I turned my life over to the Lord, I found myself on my knees after a catastrophe with Proverbs in my hands and the book of Proverbs. So for those of you who don't know, book of Proverbs is King Solomon. There was a couple other kings in there, I think, that were passing down wisdom to their sons. So this was like the wisdom literature passed down from the Israeli royalty back in ancient times, from father king to son, to train them up in the ways that ought to be lived in the world. And so I was reading Proverbs, and what I found in there is that if you do X and Y, then it'll result with Z. And in other words, that if you avoid trouble, you'll have good outcomes. In short, if you revere the Lord, he'll, this is combining some other verses, but he'll make your path straight. He'll guide you to things like wisdom is more valuable than silver and gold, and the beginning of wisdom is reverence or awe or fear of the Lord. And so there's all these things, and I took all that, and it made sense to me, and I said, okay, so Lord, if your promises are true, then I will. If your promises are true and they come true in my life, I will follow you for the rest of my days, and I will profess your goodness under any circumstances that you give me the opportunity to profess your goodness. And so I began this transaction, looking back in retrospect, and effectively that transaction was, Lord, if you bless me, then I will follow you. And that worked for me, and he blessed me, and I cannot denounce the goodness that comes from following the wisdom of Proverbs. But I've had to take a broader view since my wife was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And the morning that we found out that it was the morning after the night that we found out that Jenni had stage 4 cancer, we began the book of Job. And for those of you that don't know, Job was this a righteous person who followed all the ways of the Lord, and effectively Satan came to test him and say, does this man really believe you? Does he really follow you? Or does he just follow you? Is he just righteous because you bless him? Is that why he loves you? Because if you take all those things away, he'll probably curse you to your face. And that was the story, part of the story of Job. And one of the things that brought me comfort in that was that there was this point when I love the line in the New Living, is the NIV, the New International Version or something like that. Where he says, brace yourself like a man, because I'm about to tell you what's really going on here, which is that you have no idea what's really going on here. Like, do you understand why the waves do what they do with the land? Do you understand why the stars spin the way they do in the heavens? Do you understand why the animals act the way they do? Can you manage all that stuff? Do you have a clue about any of that stuff? Were you here when I laid the foundations of the earth? And effectively, Job was left standing there going, like, who am I to question you? Like, you're the one who gave me everything I have, and you're the one who can take everything I have away. And at the end of the day, all I can do is throw my hands up and say, I am not God, you are, and I don't have the answers, and you do. Job effectively cursed the day that he was born, but he didn't curse the Lord. And that was pretty inspiring for me to hear that. And then we got into Ecclesiastes. And for those of you who don't know, some people think Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon when he was older, but a lot of it was like everything is smoke in the wind, basically. You could spend your whole life chasing after material things and family and wealth, and you can be diligent and you can do all the things that Proverbs says, but it doesn't necessarily mean that good things are going to happen to you, because sometimes righteous people suffer in terrible ways, and terrible people are lifted up into positions of authority, and and grace and blessing, and so so I'm sitting with this like contradiction and in this paradox between all these things, and looking at the circumstances of my wife's cancer and asking myself, like, do I really have, like, do I love the Lord for the sake of love, or do I love the Lord for what he does for me? And I can tell you that up until recently, I've loved the Lord for what he does for me. And recently I've had to ask myself, will I love the Lord if he takes everything away from me? And the fact of the matter is, I don't know. Like, he hasn't taken everything away from me. I was reading a story recently about this woman who, a Jewish woman, was World War II, and she volunteered to go on a train with a bunch of children that were heading to Auschwitz, and she knew that they were heading to Auschwitz, and she knew that they were heading to meet their fate. And she chose to get on that train and accompany these children to Auschwitz. And it kind of struck me, like, what would that have been like to be on that train with those children? Like, how could you look them in the face knowing that they were gonna die, and that there was this great tragedy coming? And it occurred to me that even if Jenni is miraculously healed, it's only pushing pause on the inevitable fate of that we're all going to die. And in effect, we're all on our train to Auschwitz, in a manner of speaking. Like, none of us get out of here alive. If she's miraculously healed, what does that mean? She lives another 20 years, 10 years, 1 year? Does that mean I even live another 5, 10, 20 years? It doesn't mean any of that. And how do I relate to life in light of all that when I'm effectively on my own train to Auschwitz? And it brings this like weightiness to my day when I look at my children and they're crying about needing connection, and they don't know how to articulate it, and they just want a hug, but they're acting out because they don't have a better way of articulating it. And so so am I going to get frustrated, or am I going to get down on my knee and reach out my arms and say, here I am, and I'm available to connect with you and love you, even though we're all on our train to Auschwitz, in a manner of speaking. And so I've been struggling with, like, do I need to see a miracle in order for my faith to grow? And I don't know the answer to that. And will my faith be rocked if everything is taken away from me? And I don't know the answer to that. And how do I get through all this, and how do I honor the Lord in all of this? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know one thing. When I was in the depths of my addiction, for those of you that don't know, there was a period of time when I was an IV meth addict. There was a period of time when I was addicted to pornography and nicotine and you name it. I'm still probably addicted to coffee today, but I'm okay with that. But there was this point in the trajectory of my addiction when I had to invite the Lord into my mess, because I was stuck in this cycle of shame. I would have this compulsive behavior, and I would act out in this compulsive behavior, and then I would experience shame, and that shame would drive me back into the compulsive behavior, and I was just caught in this wheel of compulsion and addiction, and it was ruining my life, it was ruining my health, it was ruining my future. And I remember with each one of those, when I was an IV meth addict, when I was viewing material that was an abomination to the Lord, frankly, and it was abusive, and in other words, it was, in a sense, it was abusive to honoring God's children by viewing the material that I was viewing. It's when you realize that these people that you're watching in pornography are like God's kids, like that's Jesus's daughter that you're looking at, it kind of puts it in a different light. And I remember that in those moments, with each one of those addictions, there came a time when I chose to invite the Lord into my addiction with me. Like, I had to acknowledge that I was an addict, and that I was caught in the grips of addiction, and that it occurred to me that in order to break free of the shackles of addiction, that I needed to invite the Lord into it with me. So I literally would say, all right, Lord, I'm going to use, and I'm inviting you to come with me, because I'm not going to hide in shame anymore. And I'm going with, with pornography and these other things, I'm going to use, and I'm inviting you into it with me. I don't know if you can imagine inviting Jesus with you to go watch pornography. It's pretty, talk about vulnerable. That's a vulnerable moment. And I got to tell you, though, that by allowing myself to be seen like that, somehow it broke the chains off of me. And in each one of those instances, I was set free in time. And I think a lot of it had to do with just me authentically bringing myself before the Lord and saying, this is who I am, and this is where I'm at, and this is why I'm sharing this with you all, because as it relates to this walk of faith that is changing in me. And, I heard it said recently, it was one of the songs I was listening to called New Wine, that it's a metaphor in Christianity that you can't birth something new in an old container. So they would say, they were talking about the old Jews and the religious laws and how they weren't available to receive the new covenant. And they used a metaphor saying something to the effect that you can't put new wine in an old wineskin, because as it ferments, it blows the old wineskin out. And, in me, I can't have the new wine. I can't have the new orientation to the Lord. I can't relate to the Lord newly outside of a transactional relationship and learn what it's like to be loved and to love without having to have some kind of transaction to earn it, to deserve it, without getting crushed like a grape and producing the new wine. So that's kind of where I'm at today. And the reason I'm sharing all this with you is because I don't have the answer to these things. But I don't need to, because I know I can turn to the Lord and I can say, Lord, here I am. I'm inviting you into this with me. And I know from personal experience that that's what he wants. He doesn't want my pretense, and he doesn't want my good enoughness, and he doesn't want my efforting and my transaction, and he doesn't want my trying to hold it together, and he doesn't want my presentation of how I think it ought to be in order to be good enough to be loved by him. And he's stripping all that away from me and leaving me with this question of what's next. And the answer is I don't know. I don't know what's next. But I know that I trust him, and I know that I want more faith, and I know that I can ask him for these things, because he said you have not because you ask not. And he wouldn't give a snake to a child that asked for a loaf of bread, just like we wouldn't give our child a snake if they asked for a loaf of bread. He's not gonna give me something other than more faith when I seek it. So in that light, I'm excited about what's next. I don't have the answers. I don't know how to grow into what's before me, but I know that he does, and I know that he's taken me this far, and I know that I can trust him to take me further, and for that I'm truly grateful. And if any of you have any insight into this path, have walked this before me, have some kind of, I don't know, pray for me, got some guidance for me, I have no idea what I'm doing here, frankly. I'm just trying to bare my soul, and this is the only way I know how to do it. So anyways, thanks for walking through it with me, and God bless you guys.